Today's watercolour splashes demo is going to be about creating fresh, lovely oranges. I've talked before in a previous video in testing out purples, and I think even an earlier one on greens, how in watercolour it's actually crucial to understand what all of these tubes of colour that you go out and buy, what the effects are when you mix them to get nice bright secondary colours. So to create an orange, you can either buy something in a tube already, or you're going to mix yellows and reds. When you mix your own secondary colours, you actually are going to be using colours that you've got throughout your painting. So it works really well and in harmony with everything that you've got going there. Whereas when you just choose an orange that's already mixed, you're not quite sure what you're going to do in regard to making that work with other colours in your painting. So whilst I have two oranges in my palette, I often, when I'm perhaps painting flowers, poppies for instance, will mix my own oranges. But I'm going to have a go today to show you how important it is to perhaps make the right colour choices with a yellow and a red, because not all yellows and all reds are going to make a pretty orange. So let's have a little play today and see what we've got. I sort my primary colours into cools and warms. So here I've got cool yellow and warm yellow, cool red and warm red. And there's a right mixture to get a nice bright orange, but there's lovely mixtures to get nice oranges, but they might not necessarily be the highly saturated orange that you're looking for. So let's do a little bit of playing. I've also treated myself recently to some new Holbein colours, which I'd like to have a look and see how they are for making oranges. So let me work on this little sheet and try and explain what I'm doing as we're going along. And you can try testing out your yellows and reds to see how you can come up with the nicest looking oranges. I quickly gave my yellows and reds in here a little bit of a clean up because they were looking a little bit not particularly nice looking. But I'm just going to put down, first of all, just down the bottom here, two oranges that I have in my palette. So these are tube oranges. So this particular one here is Schminky translucent orange. This is a really nice colour, and you'd think to yourself, well, why would I bother trying to mix when I can have a lovely colour like that? But sometimes you're already using a red and a yellow in your painting somewhere else, and it's nice to know that it's all going to work well and you're not going to have a different type of mix in there. But that's beautiful. The other one that I have in here is a Daniel Smith transparent Pyrrole orange. It's much darker. I wouldn't be calling that a bright orange by any means, but that would work really well in landscapes. Maybe not so much the flower paintings, but there's two tube made that I have in here that I must use from time to time because they're sitting in my regular palette. But how about, let's see how we go about creating from a selection of yellows and reds. So first of all, we want a couple of swatches at the top here. So we want to be able to put in a cool yellow. I'm just going to grab my colour wheel as well so we can just talk about that. So here's my colour wheel, so I can refer to this as we're going. But I'm going to first of all put down a cool yellow. Now a cool yellow leans towards the cooler side of the colour wheel. So it's already going round towards the greens. So let's pop that up here. Now this happens to be lemon yellow. And I think this is a Winsor & Newton lemon yellow. So that's my cool. So for my warm yellow, I will go to here. So I'm now choosing a colour, which I probably could have chosen one a bit further round because there's not a lot of difference when you look at these close up. You've got to look really closely up to see the difference. I hope you can see that on there. But here I've chosen all warm. So when you look at the two, close together. You've got the cool and you've got the warm. So for the reds, I'm going to go for a cool red, and a cool red comes round here towards the blue side, and I'm going to pick something like, maybe that's too mauve. I'll have to go back perhaps to something like, here we are, this is permanent rose. So let's put here down for my cool red, permanent rose. There we go. So that's definitely cool. You can see that that is coming around to the cool side of the colour wheel. It's not round here near the warmer yellows and oranges. But for the red, I will put in Scarlet Lake. Sometimes it's not easy to see whether something is cool or warm unless something is next to it that is warmer or cooler than it. But in the makeup of the pigment, how they get them to be cool and warm is whether they've had a little bit of blue added to them or they've had a little bit of yellow added to them. And that's what makes the difference when you're mixing your secondary colours. But when you put things in a painting, it doesn't really matter if you're looking for just a nice orange, like this thing here. But if you're actually looking for a really bright orange, you need to know which is the right combination to mix it bright. All of the others are okay, but only one combination will always guarantee you a bright orange. And that's what we're going to have a little play at here. So taking those 4 colours on the top, let's wipe that little bit of purple off of there. Oh, and I don't need those 2 shop bought colours. If I put here a cool yellow, so going back to that lemon yellow, and I put some of this cool red into it, which was that permanent rose, I'm sort of making an orange, not particularly bright looking orange. Even if I try putting a bit more yellow into it, it's looking pretty dull looking. But let's do it, pushing it with the warm red. Probably because this is Scarlet Lake, it will probably brighten up because it's a pretty intense red anyway. But that's looking prettier than this one. But you still wouldn't say that was looking anything like this tube orange down here. So now we go with the warm. So this warm yellow, which happens to be Windsor yellow, on here. And again, I'll put in a cool red with it. Almost all 3 of them look the same. Even though we've got a cool yellow, and a warm yellow, cool red, warm red, cool red. Now what if we put down the warm yellow, and now we put into it the warm red. And already you can see that that's going to be much brighter. Let me do it a little bit more intense so it's not so much water here. I've picked up a sable brush here which holds a lot of water. These are a bit watered down, but there we are. So the right combination for making bright oranges is to definitely stick to warm colours on the colour wheel. So when you're choosing your yellow and you're choosing your red, you get the ones that are closer to an orange. So it's always going to be a warm yellow because that's closest to the orange, and it's always going to be a warm red because that's closer to the orange. And that way then you will get bright secondaries. You can dull this down if it is too bright in your painting, but if you create these, you can't beef them up to get back to being bright. So it's best to know that formula in the first place. So that correct formula is this one here. So let's just mark that. So this is the formula we want. Warm yellow, warm red. What I'd like to do here is just test out a couple of these new colours, or to see how they are, because I've purchased them. I ought to understand them and see how are they going to fit in before I perhaps did a painting. I've got poppy paintings coming up, and it would be nice to have some new colours to use to give my work some variety, but I need to know how they're going to react. What I do have in this little Holbein box of colours that I've just bought, they have got a colour here called permanent yellow orange. I guess that should be an orange already pre-mixed. So let's just have a little look and see what that looks like. It's very, very bright, but it is on the yellow side. So all you'd have to do is be able to add a little bit of red to that if you really wanted to make that a bit more orange. Let's just see if I put a bit of that Scarlet Lake in with it. Yeah, look at that. A beautiful orange. Really nice. So that's mixing the permanent yellow orange with Scarlet Lake. That was my transparent Pierrot orange. And that was the translucent orange. Okay, so what else have I got in this little pot? I have a yellow and I've got a couple of reds. That's a cool red. That's probably a cool red. And that's a yellow. So let's try these out. So this is Aureolin. I never know how to say that, but that's what I say. This is Pyrrole red. So I will soon find out whether these are two warm colours, which is what I really do want to get a nice orange. So there's the yellow going down, and into it I put a bit of this red. And you'll always find one colour is much stronger than the other, and you need less of it. But when you're first testing out colours, you don't know which one's going to be the bossy one. But clearly that red is very bossy. It's not bad, but it really should have a bit more yellow. But I think this is telling me that this yellow is on the cool side, because it's not brilliant orange. So I would know if I want a brilliant orange, don't pick this one. And this was with the Pyrrole red. So not particularly good. So I'm not going to use that for oranges. What if I used, I wanted to test out my reds. Opera is a lovely colour. And I do have opera in here, but this is the Holbein one that I've just bought. What if I picked my stock standard yellow that I use, which is Windsor yellow, and I drop a bit of this opera into it? What am I going to get? Very fluoro looking. Let's put a bit more yellow in. Here we are. So it's a matter of working out who's going to be the boss, having to add a bit more of the other one. That's not bad. So looks like with my yellows, unless I use that permanent yellow orange, what would that look like with a bit of the, it's already very orange. Looks like it would have very strong covering power because it looks a little opaque. And if I put this opera into that now, That's rather nice. I like that. Yep, so I will go with the Opera and the, where is it? Permanent Yellow Orange. That's rather nice. I could see that going well in some flower painting. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take, using these new colours that I've got here, and do a little study of a poppy and put them through the test. So I'll keep my little colour swatch here so I can see what it is that I liked about the colour mixing that I did. And what I'm going to do is just do a quick little painting of this orange poppy that is opening up here, so that I can test out this combination that I've just come up with. I've got a little scrap piece of paper here that was part of a much bigger painting that didn't make the grade. It looks like it's got enough clean area on it for me to try the opening bud here, and I could just turn it around so I could get the green part up here and use this part down here. The fact that this is already sullied might not be really good to get a bright orange, but this is not really bright, so it probably would work on there, or I could get it down on that side. Now what will I do? Maybe I'll do it here. Even this has had paint on it, but it'll work for a study. So we'll quickly just draw something on here. The bud that's opening. This came out of a little bunch of poppies that I had, and my husband photographed it over the course of a few days and got this opening in different stages of opening. And when you blow it up quite large, it's really interesting to see the it all unfold. There we are, that will do. Maybe that could have been a little bit bigger up there. Let's go with that. So we're really just testing out the oranges here, but I'll be able to see how it plays with a bit of green next to it as well. But I'd like to try out this combination that I used here of that permanent yellow orange with Scarlet Lake in it, or maybe even the Opera in there, so I could have two oranges going. So I could put some pink out over here. So this is the Opera pink. It's so fluoro, but it does mix up to be pretty. And this is the Scarlet Lake. And this was the tube of permanent yellow orange. So let's just see how we go. Hopefully this piece of paper is going to behave and not be too sullied. So I think I'll just wet the area that the unfolding petals are in, so that I can drop the colour in and let it do a little bit of playing. Down the base here, it's cooler down here anyway, there, so I'll try and just perhaps keep that just this yellow there, and drop the other mixtures in up here. So just letting the brush touch the water I've already put on here. And do a bit of playing itself. There we go. Won't fuss around with it too much. I've got to let it dry. be able to make some folds on there. Just tilt it around a little bit and see what it's going to do. I wonder what would happen if I drop some of that ochre into it now. You don't know unless you try. And that's the good thing about doing little studies like this long before you actually start a serious painting. It's best to have a little play on a study and not on the painting, because if you don't like what you've done, it doesn't make any difference. You don't go any further with it. There we are, let's let that dry. I could probably just have a little look at putting some greenery around here. Isn't it interesting how they have all these little spikes on there and they're all over it? When you don't see that so much when they're little, but when it's blown up to be this big, it's a really interesting looking shape. So given I've got that there, I wonder if that's going to make a green. It says it's orange, but this green on here is not a vibrant green. So possibly if I chose one of my blues, let's just see, this possibly might dull down too much. This is French ultramarine blue. So I could just try a little bit on a piece of paper first. Put it in with that. Just going to take a fair bit of that orangey yellow. It's not bad. Could probably be a little bit brighter. Let's put a bit more paint out. Okay. At least then I'm not using too many new colours. I've just got this blue over here and continuing with that same yellow orange. I've gone down on dry paper here. Let me just keep this away from that part of my study. Put the yellow down. Water. And let's drop that blue in, which is really going to dull it down because this is actually a warm blue with a warm yellow just about. So there's no way is it going to make a bright green. It's not possible. But they're not bright greens on the poppy. So it could work out just right. Drop the blue in over here as well. Mix it up with a bit more of the yellow. When you scoop up the paint, a bit from here and a bit from there, when you go to put it down, it's going to go down varied because you can't tell whether you've got more on your brush of the blue, more on your brush of the yellowy orange. So when you put it down, it's going to always look interesting, as opposed to going round and round in your palette trying to mix up a colour, a suitable colour. Now can you see I've stayed away from the actual petal part here because I don't want that colour to go in there. I'll have to sneak up on it when it's a bit drier, but I just don't want it to touch. But there is a little white edge to it here anyway, so that helps me keep the colour away. So now all I want is to do a few little spikes on it, the stem, and then come back in to do a little bit of modelling on the orange of the this is not a very good colour for a stem, but I'm not going to mix up another one now. We'll just go with this one. Yeah, so we have a stem. So let's see what we can do about doing some little hairs on this. Now, if this was a really small poppy in a painting, you can hardly see all those little spikes, so you just don't go putting them in. But this is just a little study, and I can see them everywhere. So I would just pick a brush, perhaps a bit like a rigger brush, because that's going to keep the little marks soft, but thin, and just pull a bit of the colour out. just sort of like little flicks, almost using the wet paint that's here, that's in the wash part that's drying. No, they are actually on it as well. You can't put a stroke when this is all wet. You're just going to run back in. Or you can do the ones on the outside. And I think that will still make it read poppy without having the ones on here. But you can always put a few extra. If this was in a painting, you could put them on when your wash is dry. And they can be a bit darker. Let's just vary these up a little bit. Just using up what I've got on here. I'll just put a bit of that warmer red into here. This gives a little bit of variety. Okay, how far can we go with this? Really do need this to dry. So I might just put the hairdryer on it and come back and just see about doing a wee bit more modelling in the unfolding petals. Before I dry it, I would just like to show you, hopefully it will work, how to perhaps just lift a little bit out while it's wet. Or really what you're doing is making a little mini bloom into a drying wash here, just to get a couple of veins. So the wash is drying, you're adding water, and so it's pushing the pigment out the way and making a mini bloom. A bloom on a bloom. But it's a good way of getting a natural looking unfolding of petals on there. You need to rinse off your brush because you don't want to just be moving paint from one spot to the other. And you've got to take the moisture off, because if you don't take the moisture off, all you're going to do is make a really, really big mark when you only wanted a thin mark. But that gives me back a little bit of light in there. And now I'll dry it off. I can see this is a bit lighter under here. Let's just dry that off and see if we can finish it. If I were painting these actually in my proper poppy painting, I would do my playing with the greens as well, because this dull green is okay for the unfolding bud, but it's not good for the stem. But for this little study, that wasn't so crucial, but it would be in a painting. So I always do little colour swatches. So I would make sure I've got the oranges I want, and I'd make sure I've got the greens that I want. But what I'm going to do now is just follow a little bit of the pattern here and just try and get a bit of modelling in this. So we do need to darken it up a little bit. So we're going to have to just have a little bit of a play there. I think I could go with this red. Just have a little look here and see if I could put this red in. To try and make little fold shapes. Just to indicate, you know, I haven't drawn anything here for this, so it's a matter of just trying to put some shapes down. And it's a bit lighter under there. So I'm just trying to concentrate a little bit here on my shapes, just so that I can get some, it might not be exactly what it is here, but just see if I can get some unfolding petals. We can come a bit closer to this green up here now because it's dry. I've dried it with the hairdryer. You can get a little bit of a dark shape in there. You can still get a bit more of this darker orange coming up here. When I paint a painting full of poppies, they don't have all of this detail on there. So all I'm really after was testing out the oranges. But if you're painting something that's in focus as much as this, you can see so much more of it. It's good just to see how you're going to model it and try and get it to read what it is that you're after. So over this side over here, let's dull down a little bit. Just over here. Try not to lose those white lines that I've just put into the damp wash. And I need to come a little bit closer. Just a little bit closer over here. A little bit of a mark or two up here. Now, if you want to put in, if you were doing this, and you wanted to put in those little hairs, you could do this now on the dry. Because this is dry, if I did little flicky bits on it now, they would stay. But how many you want to do? Just give an indication that this is a close-up of an opening poppy, and it's got millions of these little hairs all over it. So this was a good little chance to try out some new oranges for me. Will I use them? I think I certainly will use the combination. This one here, I like that. I also like that. So that's taking two of the new colours, combining it with something I've already got, which means I haven't wasted buying something new. I know I'm going to be able to put it in a painting, but I haven't committed myself to it without doing the little test first. So really, I've got a fair idea what my results are going to be, colour-wise, and I'm not going to get any surprises. I think that's really what it's about. Okay, I'll probably leave that at that here. So not a perfect green, because we're just using up sort of what's on here. And it's just a little study following up on testing out the oranges. So if you like to paint with nice bright colours, you make sure you've made your right colour choices first, and then you won't be disappointed when you get going on your painting. So thanks for watching. Until next time, bye.